We are taught to trust the light, the antiseptic glow of the operating room, the cold certainty of the stainless steel. But what if the shadows of ancient dread still linger in those halls? What if the desperate quest for healing hides a chilling truth? That some of the most horrifying methods of the past have merely been given new, modern masks? Tonight, we step through the sterile veil into a place where the cure itself holds a dark secret, and the line between saving a life and stealing a life begins to blur. This is not a story of dusty history books, but of the persistence of fear across time. It is a chilling exploration of 100 terrifying medical truths, from things whispered about 1,000 years ago to things happening in hospitals right now. We will explore the human need to survive, and the terrible compromises we still make in the name of help. These are not just treatments, they are echoes of forgotten rituals, so strange and awful they feel like whispers from a cursed ancient time. They deepen the mystery of the central question. What dark force connects humanity's darkest moments, and what do they reveal about our eternal fears? The thirst of the living. Even now you carry within you the ancient terror that life itself is a delicate balance of strange humours and vital fluids. The old belief that sickness is merely bad blood needing to be drawn out persists in the shadowed corners of modern healing. Think of the leech, a grotesque symbolic image of draining life force. While we may call it by a cleaner technical name today, the chilling principle remains the same. The body is bled, the life force is adjusted, and a hidden price is paid for the illusion of a cure. The whisper of ancient fear suggests the darkness always demands a physical offering. The most modern term for therapeutic blood removal, called phlebotomy, still involves the calculated removal of that precious crimson life liquid. For conditions like polycythemia, where the blood grows too thick, the chilling prescription is simple: let the blood go. It is a necessary act, yet it calls back to the darker ages where this was a ritualistic act of desperate cleansing, not clinical science. The tension between silence and revelation suggests that every sterile needle holds a memory of the crude blade. We are reminded that every century peels back only a new thin layer of history's shadows. Consider the strange symbiotic horror of hirudo-therapy, where leeches are still applied deliberately in microsurgery to save grafted skin. The small dark creatures are placed on delicate tissue, feeding to drain excess blood, blurring the line between myth and reality. This grotesque method saves limbs, proving that sometimes the most sophisticated science still must bend to the most primordial horror. It is a paradox. Life is saved by submitting to a method steeped in the very deepest fear of ancient darkness, reminding us of the persistent influence of the supernatural, the harvest of the young. The hunt for fresh, vital human material is an ancient horror that has evolved, but never truly vanished. It rests on the chilling fantasy that the decline of the old can be perpetually solved by harvesting the promise of the young. This desperation leads to the cold commerce of umbilical cord blood, rich in stem cells, collected at the moment of birth. It is presented as a miraculous insurance policy, but the sheer scale of collection speaks to a profound belief that the most potent form of healing must be stolen from the very beginning of life itself, echoing a truly primal fear. The storage of these precious cells, often in vast, isolated biobanks, suggests a powerful and secretive industry built around life's raw materials. These dark places, filled with untold frozen vitality, operate under the surface of everyday life. This practice gives the illusion of victory over time, but it deepens the mystery of the central question. What power does the material of life truly hold, and what moral line is crossed when a child's birthright is immediately treated as a commodity? We must acknowledge the quiet whispers of ancient fears surrounding sacrifice. The most disturbing element is the ethical chasm this practice creates. Who truly owns the most fundamental essence of life? If these cells are not banked, they are discarded as mere waste, yet their potential is immense. This forces us to confront a terrifying paradox. We throw away untold potential every day, even as others desperately pay immense sums to capture the smallest bit of it. The darkness asks, is the only true miracle the one you pay for? This entire process suggests the persistence of fear across time. The scarred vessel. The chilling, ancient practice of scarification, carving symbols into the body as a ritual of passage or healing, has returned in the form of deep, deliberate keloid surgery. This is where flesh is cut, not to heal a wound, but to deliberately cause a complex, raised, often painful and permanent mark. The purpose is not cosmetic, but clinical. To remove growths and repair past injuries, but the process is a calculated violation of the body's natural state. It is a frightening mirror of the symbolic imagery used in dark rituals. This medical choice is a brutal bargain. To achieve a smooth surface, you must first create a deeper wound, relying on the body's own frantic, uncontrolled healing response. This intentional wounding echoes the ceremonial use of scars in some cultures, where the mark itself holds a spiritual or mythic power. Here, the power is purely clinical, yet the act feels fundamentally archaic, relying on the body's terror response to repair itself. The operation is a confrontation with the very persistence of pain. The aftermath of keloid removal is a long, agonizing regimen involving pressure, gels, and often radiation therapy, itself a frightening act of controlled destruction. The skin is forced into submission, but the battle to keep the scar from returning can last for years. It is a constant, subtle reminder that the body remembers every violation, and the wound often desires to return. This conflict between silence and revelation is a profound statement on the body's defiant memory. The implanted lie. The insertion of foreign objects beneath the skin to control or correct the body is a horrifying concept rooted in ancient curses and talismans. Today, this is done through simple, small hormone implants placed under the arm to control fertility or manage disease. Yet, the act itself is profoundly unnerving, relying on a hidden object inside you to dictate your life's rhythms. The object is a cursed artifact that acts as a key to dark truths about control. This technique is a powerful exercise in chemical obedience, where a tiny, unseen capsule whispers silent commands to your biology for years. The fear isn't just about the physical intrusion, but the loss of autonomy, the feeling that a cold, inert piece of metal is now the master of your body's most basic functions. It speaks to a deep, primal vulnerability, that a small, secret object can hold so much power over your future. This is a contrast between the quiet darkness and the loud revelation of chemical control. When these implants fail or need to be removed, the subtle, quick procedure turns into a frightening hunt for the foreign material beneath the flesh. The body, it seems, instinctively attempts to hide the intrusion, often embedding the capsule deeper than expected. The doctor must dig into the tissue, transforming a simple removal into a small, frantic excavation. This reinforces the idea that the body resists being controlled, and the process is full of foreshadowing of potential future complications. The controlled fire. The ancient practice of cauterization, burning tissue to stop bleeding or destroy disease, is a fundamental horror that still finds a place in modern surgery. Electrocautery uses controlled, precise bursts of electrical current to sear, or burn, tissue shut. It is a necessary evil, but the primal smell and sight of the smoking flesh connect us directly to a barbarous past. This act of controlled destruction is a confrontation with the very essence of hidden horror. The necessity of the burn reveals a dark truth. To truly stop a life-threatening flow, a part of the body must be sacrificed through fire. While sterile and precise, the underlying method is fundamentally aggressive, echoing the ancient desperation of the war-torn fields where heated metal was the only tool. The sheer violence of the technique, using fire to save, is a disturbing paradox that demands a deep, lingering sense of awe and terror. The sudden burst of heat contrasts sharply with the silent tension. The aftermath of electrocautery leaves a deep, permanent mark, a controlled wound designed to become permanent scar tissue. This mark is a silent witness to the body's near-death experience, a reminder of the edge we live on. It suggests that even the most advanced science cannot escape the raw, elemental power of fire as a force of both destruction and preservation. The interplay of light and darkness is profound, as the surgical light illuminates the searing instrument. The body's hostage. The use of ventilators embodies a terrifying modern horror, the ability to sustain a life artificially, trapping a conscious mind inside a failing body. It is a miracle of engineering, yet it holds a person hostage to a machine's rhythm. The patient is alive only by the grace of forced air, a constant rhythmic invasion of the body's most basic autonomic function. This reliance on the machine reflects the recurring motif of haunted or cursed artifacts as keys to dark truths. This machine stands as a symbolic, unfeeling jailer, dictating the breath of life. The rhythmic pumping sound of the ventilator becomes the soundtrack of existential dread, a cold, metallic voice speaking over the silent screams of the patient who may be awake and aware, yet completely immobilized. The ventilator, while saving life, strips away every trace of independence, leaving only the mechanical connection between life and its cessation. This terrifying situation is a dramatic use of contrast between silence and revelation. The ultimate horror rests in the decision to turn the machine off, the terrifying moment when life is reduced to an electrical switch. This is where human will and mechanical power collide, where a technical intervention must be consciously undone by human hands. It is a responsibility that echoes the ancient fears of playing God, placing the ultimate power of life and death into the sterile, cold hands of technology. The lingering sense of unease is a profound revelation about human mortality. The artificial blood drain. The dialysis machine, a device that cleanses the blood when the kidneys fail, is a mechanical miracle built on a terrifying premise that you must surrender your essential life fluid to an external processor multiple times a week. It is a necessary procedure, but the process of shunting all your blood outside your body, across a synthetic membrane and back again, is a profound and ancient violation of the body's integrity. This entire scenario is an unnerving metaphor for the persistence of fear across time. For hours, the patient is tethered to the machine, the entire volume of lifeblood placed at the mercy of tubes, pumps, and sterile filters. The vulnerability is immense. The dark realization that a mechanical error, a small miscalculation, could mean instant death. The cold, rhythmic hum of the machine as it performs the body's most sacred function speaks to the loss of natural life, turning survival into a terrifying, scheduled appointment with technology. This process uses repetition to emphasize the patient's eternal dependence. To facilitate this constant surrender of blood, a permanent access point must be surgically created, a fistula or graft, a thick, unnaturally bulging lifeline beneath the skin. This physical alteration, a constant reminder of the body's fundamental failure, is a visible mark of the dependence on the machine. It is a form of permanent scarification, a strange symbolic imagery that whispers of ancient rituals where the sick were marked by their ailments. This haunting necessity deepens the mystery of hidden connections. The forced rejection. The ultimate terror of organ transplantation is the violent biological betrayal that follows the miraculous graft, the forced immune suppression. To accept a donated organ, the body's entire defense system must be chemically shut down, rendering the recipient permanently vulnerable to every whisper of illness or infection. It is a chilling compromise where one terrifying risk, organ failure, is simply traded for a different, terrifying risk, the constant threat of lethal invasion. This is a profound paradox in the quest for healing. The patient lives under a lifelong siege, dependent on pills that act as chemical spies, forcing the body to pretend the foreign organ is its own. This daily ingestion of medicine, which weakens the natural defences, reflects an almost mythological bargain, a Faustian deal for survival. It asks the chilling rhetorical question, what is the true cost of borrowed life, and how much of your own sovereignty must you surrender to a pill bottle? This is a heavy meditation on the interplay of light and darkness. The constant fear of rejection means the body is never truly at rest, always on the edge of internal violent war. The foreign organ is a beautiful but unwanted cursed artifact that constantly threatens to reveal its true alien nature. The fear of a flu becoming a terminal diagnosis is the price of their new life. This constant state of biological tension speaks to a dark truth about survival. The body must be forced against its own will to accept the miracle. The sleepless vigil. The use of sleep deprivation as a clinical tool to manage severe depression is a horrific, ancient-feeling torture rebranded as therapy. By keeping the mind awake for days, doctors hope to reset the brain's clock, but this forces the patient into a desperate, vulnerable state. This procedure relies on exhausting the mind until it is too weak to hold on to its own darkness. It is a chilling example of contrast between silence and revelation, where silence is achieved through brutal exhaustion. The mind, when starved of its natural rest, begins to play tricks, experiencing moments of hallucination or heightened manic energy. This forced mania is seen as the cure, but it is achieved through a violation of the body's most fundamental need. It echoes the historical interrogation techniques that use sensory deprivation to break the will. The doctor is, in effect, using controlled psychological torment to achieve a temporary, fragile moment of clarity. This is a profound, hidden horror lurking beneath a clinical label. The therapy is a terrifying gamble because the effects are short-lived. The mind eventually collapses into sleep, and the darkness often rushes back in with renewed force. It is a desperate, unsustainable measure that confirms a disturbing truth. The most brutal historical methods of control, stripping away rest, are still seen as necessary. It serves as a haunting reminder that sometimes the only way out is through a forced confrontation with the absolute limit of human endurance. The forced faint. The administration of strong sedatives to patients during minor procedures, a state known as twilight sedation, is a subtle horror. The patient is semi-conscious, able to respond to commands, but afterwards they remember nothing of the event. They are physically present, yet their memory is erased, a chilling theft of experience. This use of chemical submission reflects a deep fear of lost control and the mind's willing surrender to oblivion. This is a powerful use of symbolic imagery. This pharmaceutical oblivion is a disturbing safety measure. It ensures the patient cannot react to the pain or fear, but also ensures they have no conscious memory of what was done to them. The mind is temporarily silenced, rendered a compliant, mute observer of its own medical violation. The process relies on a strange, profound faith in the chemicals, that they will erase only the bad memories, leaving the patient whole but hollowed out in that specific time slot. The lingering sense of unease comes when the patient is told the procedure is over, realizing hours have vanished without any personal accountability or memory. This forced forgetting is a chilling demonstration of power, the ability to edit a person's own timeline. The doctor guides the audience through this haunted corridor of history, reminding us that every silence holds a potential secret, and that chemical control is merely a modern form of ancient spellcasting. The calculated coldness. The chilling technique of therapeutic hypothermia is a modern miracle built upon a primordial dread, placing the body near death to save it. After a heart stops, doctors deliberately cool the body, lowering its temperature to a state that is almost clinical death. This extreme cold is meant to slow the frantic decay of the brain. It is an act of calculated coldness, forcing the very core of a person to stop fighting, pushing the human form to its absolute icy limit. The sudden drop in temperature is a dramatic contrast between silence and revelation. For hours, the patient exists in this suspended state, a paradox of life held by the force of freezing. The body is silent, metabolism slowed to a crawl, and the mind is in a medically induced slumber. This quiet vigil over the frozen body echoes the ancient fear of premature burial, or the myths of bodies perfectly preserved in ice. It is a terrifying, deliberate violation of natural rhythm, forcing life to wait until the damage can be contained. The room becomes a haunted location, suspended in a silent, chilling moment. When the body is finally warmed slowly back to normal temperature, it is a perilous return from the edge. The process is a profound gamble, a desperate attempt to rewind the clock on decay. The outcome is never certain, and the return to warmth is an unnerving resurrection. This chilling procedure serves as a haunting reminder of the persistence of fear across time, confirming that salvation often requires an unnervingly close dance with death. The skin thief. The process of harvesting skin grafts is a silent horror, stealing healthy tissue from one part of the body to mend a grievous wound in another. It is a necessary act of survival, but it creates two wounds where there was only one, forcing the body to betray itself. The flesh is sliced away, often in thin, precise sheets, leaving the donor site a large, raw, and agonizing open injury that must heal through secondary intention. This is a terrifying example of hidden horror. The donor site, often the thigh or back, becomes a large, raw burn, permanently scarred by the theft. This new, deliberately created wound speaks to the terrible price of mending, a literal sacrifice of healthy tissue to save a damaged area. The new scar is a physical testament to the ethical complexity of the procedure, a permanent mark of the body's internal civil war. The raw, exposed area evokes a profound sense of sensory immersion, reminding us of flesh's frailty. The grafted skin, placed on the burn or injury, is often mottled and unnaturally tight, a constant reminder that the body has been patched with borrowed parts. It is a physical embodiment of the paradox of modern medicine. Life is saved, but the surface integrity is permanently compromised. The process asks us to confront the deepest fear, that salvation requires the self to be literally cannibalized, stripping away part of oneself to survive. The skull's opening, the continuation of trepanation, the practice of deliberately drilling a hole into the human skull, is a terrifying echo from the deepest past. Today, this is done with precision tools to relieve pressure from swelling or bleeding on the brain, a life-saving act. Yet, the method itself is inherently brutal, forcing us to violate the final defense of the mind. The cold, mechanical act calls forth the whispers of ancient fears surrounding the violation of the skull. Ancient peoples believed this hole allowed spirits to escape or enter, viewing the procedure with a chilling mixture of awe and fear. In the modern surgical theatre, the drill bit replaces the crude stone blade, but the primal shock remains. The sight of the skull being penetrated, the shell of consciousness broken, is a profound and fundamental horror. It is a moment of intense tension and vulnerability, an extreme exposure of the self to the outside world. When the whole is complete, the brain is exposed, fragile and pulsing just beneath the thin membrane. The subsequent placement of a metal plate or patch over the entry point acts as a permanent artificial seal. The patient walks through the rest of their life with a deliberate break in their most sacred armour, a constant physical reminder of the edge of oblivion. This act transforms the skull into a cursed artifact holding a dark truth about survival. The forced paralysis. The use of paralytic drugs to render a patient completely motionless during surgery or critical care is a profound, terrifying loss of control. The mind remains conscious, or semi-aware, but the body is locked down, unable to twitch, speak, or signal distress. This chemical imprisonment ensures that the patient cannot interfere with the delicate work of the surgeon, but it is an unnerving form of chemical submission. Imagine the ultimate horror, being fully awake during a procedure but unable to signal the pain, trapped inside a silent, unmoving shell. This phenomenon, known as anesthesia awareness, is rare, yet the fear of it is universal. The patient becomes a living, breathing symbolic imagery of powerlessness, a still statue whose interior world is running in frantic, unheard terror. The surgical lights become oppressively bright, illuminating the patient's profound vulnerability. The paralysis is a deep, primal form of control, forcing the body to obey the will of the medicine. When the drugs begin to wear off, the return of sensation is often a slow, terrifying crawl, a tentative regaining of control over the edges of the fingers and toes. It is a transition from death-like silence back to life, a terrifying journey that leaves the patient with a deep, existential gratitude for the simplest motor function. This is a dramatic use of repetition in the return to life. The deep burn. The use of radiation therapy to destroy cancer is a modern form of dark magic, a controlled, invisible poison used to defeat a more chaotic one. It uses high-energy beams to inflict massive internal damage, targeting the core of the disease. This procedure is an act of calculated destruction, where life is saved by inflicting deep, violent burns from the inside out. It reflects the ancient practice of counter-poisoning, where a lesser horror is used to fight a greater one. The horror is magnified by the invisible nature of the attack. The patient feels nothing during the treatment, yet they know an immense silent wave of energy is tearing through their internal landscape. The effects are systemic, causing profound fatigue and illness. The patient becomes a haunted location, marked not by external wounds, but by the systemic trauma inflicted by the healing light. This procedure deeply explores the interplay of light and darkness. The side effects are a living hell, a period of forced exhaustion where the body is too busy fighting the treatment's damage to enjoy the fight against the disease. The patient is living in the tension of a perpetual gamble, hoping the cure kills the cancer before it kills the host. This terrifying process forces the patient to confront the full reality of their life or death situation, acting as a powerful piece of foreshadowing for the outcome. The internal camera's gaze. The use of endoscopy, feeding a camera and instruments deep inside the body through natural openings, is a profound violation of internal privacy. This technology gives the doctor an internal voyeuristic eye, but it reduces the patient to a passive open vessel. The camera becomes a technological symbolic imagery, viewing the secrets of the inner self through a cold, unblinking lens. This act of invasion evokes a deep sense of vulnerability. The patient is often awake or lightly sedated, aware that a foreign object is moving through their most secret pathways. The feeling of the internal maneuvering, the cold, distant perspective of the camera, is unnerving. The procedure transforms the internal landscape into a television screen, stripping away the mystery of the body and turning it into a public, observable spectacle for the doctor. This experience is a profound example of sensory immersion, focusing on the feeling of internal intrusion. The images captured by the camera, projected onto a screen, are clinical and sterile, yet they hold the chilling, secret truth of the patient's inner health. This contrast between the cold, external view and the warm internal reality is a frightening reminder of the mind's separation from the body. The entire procedure is a quiet, profound act of surrender, where the patient must allow the mechanical gaze to penetrate their most private internal spaces. The chemical sleep general anesthesia is the ultimate profound surrender, a chemical journey into an induced state of clinical death. It is a necessary suspension of consciousness, but the terror lies in the fact that the mind is taken to the brink of oblivion and trusted to return whole. This temporary complete erasure of awareness is a literal enactment of the boundary between myth and reality, blurring the line between sleeping and true passing. The administration of the gas or injection is a sudden, quiet descent into darkness. The mind is cut off from the body, leaving the patient completely defenseless against the possibility of never returning. This moment of surrender is a profound act of faith in technology, but the act itself feels like an ancient, dark ritual where the soul is temporarily evicted from the body. The sheer lack of control speaks to a profound and unnerving hidden horror. The drugs involved in anesthesia are powerful, often deadly compounds that must be precisely controlled. The margin between therapeutic oblivion and terminal overdose is terrifyingly thin. This daily dance on the edge of lethality is a constant reminder that modern medicine often requires the use of potent, destructive forces to achieve healing. The entire process is a deep existential open loop, leaving the patient forever wondering what happened in the erased time. The forced feeding. The use of nasogastric tubes for feeding, inserted directly through the nose and down the throat into the stomach, is a necessary violence. While life-saving, this constant mechanical invasion strips the simple act of eating, a primal, social pleasure, of all humanity. The tube, a constant visible foreign object, is a persistent reminder that the body has failed, and its most basic function is now controlled by a machine. This reflects a disturbing repetition of mechanical control. The discomfort of the tube is relentless, causing a constant sense of choking and violation. The patient is reduced to a passive receptacle, receiving sustenance without the ability to taste, chew, or reject. This process is a deep, agonizing stripping away of autonomy, reducing a person to their fundamental biological needs, ignoring the psychological cost. It is a terrifying example of the sensory immersion of chronic discomfort. The machine that pumps the specialized pale formula into the tube acts as a mechanical replacement for the warmth of food and the presence of human care. The whirring sound of the pump becomes the only sound associated with nourishment. This process profoundly challenges our sense of self, transforming the act of living into a clinical, unfeeling procedure that emphasizes the cold control of technology over natural human desire. The artificial heartbeat. The pacemaker is a small implanted device that takes over the sacred rhythm of the heart, correcting its failures with precise electrical commands. This device is a modern miracle, yet it is a terrifying intrusion. A cursed artifact inserted into the most vital core of a person, dictating their very existence. The patient now lives not by the natural silent beat of life, but by the cold, calculated pulses of a battery-powered device. The fear lies in the dependence, the realization that if the battery fails or the wire fractures, life ceases instantly. The patient lives tethered to a technological lifespan, their ultimate fate governed by the finite energy of a small metal box. This profound vulnerability is a terrifying modern echo of ancient myths, where life was tied to an external breakable talisman. It forces us to confront the terrifying rhetorical question: what does it mean to be alive when your life is running on a timer? The implantation of the device requires the placement of wires directly into the heart muscle, turning the body's most romantic and mysterious organ into an object of invasive technology. The constant, silent rhythm of the pacemaker is a profound act of repetition, reminding the patient every second that their survival is mechanical, not organic. This is a dramatic manifestation of the persistence of fear that life can be taken with the flick of a switch. The silent evisceration. The laparoscopy technique, where surgeons operate through small, multiple incisions using long, thin instruments and a camera, is a horrifyingly quiet method of internal evisceration. The abdomen is often first inflated with gas, forcing the organs into unnatural positions before the small holes are made. This process transforms a massive open surgical wound into several small, neat punctures, but the internal chaos is still profound. This is a hidden horror disguised by modern precision. The surgeon views the internal process on a monitor, performing complex, life-altering procedures by remote vision. This detachment reduces the visceral reality of the operation, making the cutting and maneuvering feel strangely distant and unfeeling. The body is transformed into a closed box, and the surgeon manipulates its contents with long, metallic extensions. This process emphasizes the dark irony of the contrast between silence and revelation. The aftermath is often surprisingly clean, leaving tiny scars that heal quickly, but the internal rearrangement and trauma are just as significant. The body, though outwardly untouched, has been profoundly violated and reorganized. The silent manipulation from the outside belies the deep, surgical violence on the inside. This tension between the visible and the invisible reinforces the central idea of the dark truth lurking beneath the surface of sophisticated care. The implanted shard. The insertion of shunts and drains, plastic tubes left intentionally in the body to manage fluid buildup after surgery, is a silent, ongoing horror. These tubes are essentially foreign objects, small, unnatural passageways that pierce the flesh and connect the inside to the outside world. They are a necessary intervention, but they feel like a barbaric form of sustained, open trauma, a constant reminder that the body's natural systems are failing. This act reflects a deep, disturbing paradox in the quest for healing. The presence of the shard-like plastic piercing the body's wall is a profound psychological violation. The patient is never truly sealed, never truly whole, until the tube is finally pulled out. This constant, visible marker of vulnerability echoes ancient concepts of the exposed soul. The fluid slowly draining through the tube, a mix of blood and plasma, is a literal visualization of the body's internal leakage, a private horror made public and clinically controlled. When the time comes to remove the drain, the tube is often pulled out quickly, without further incision, an unnerving act that causes a sudden, sharp, internal, tearing sensation. This quick, violent extraction, though minor, is a final, primal act of violation, confirming that the path to healing is paved with repeated trauma. The lingering pain is a final, physical, symbolic imagery of the body's deep reluctance to surrender its secrets. The borrowed bone. The practice of bone grafting, taking bone tissue from one part of the body, often the hip or pelvis, to repair a defect in another area, is a silent act of self-cannibalism. This sacrifice, involves hollowing out a piece of healthy load-bearing structure to fix a more critical break. It saves a limb or a jaw, but it leaves the donor site with a chronic, deep, agonizing pain, transforming a solution into a lifelong sacrifice. This process is a terrifying example of hidden horror. The donor site becomes a permanent point of weakness, a constant low-level ache that serves as a physical memorial to the surgery. The body is tricked into believing it is being helped, yet it must endure two traumas. The act itself is a profound violation of the skeletal structure, the very framework of the self. The empty space left behind in the donor bone is a literal void, a ghostly absence where dense life once resided, reflecting a deep philosophical horror. This borrowed bone, now living in a new place, is forever a foreign object, slowly being integrated, but carrying the memory of its original location. The entire procedure forces us to confront the terrifying reality that to rebuild one part of ourselves, we must fundamentally dismantle another. The body is a terrifying closed system, where life is simply shuffled from one broken place to another, never truly created anew. The forced womb. The use of in vitro fertilization, IVF, while a miracle of hope, holds a terrifying hidden horror: the creation and subsequent cold storage or destruction of surplus human embryos. Life is brought into being, then suspended indefinitely in cryogenic tanks, becoming a frozen commodity held hostage by technology and law. This profound moral ambiguity is an unnerving example of the persistence of fear across time. The deep, existential terror lies in the concept of life held in perpetual limbo, a collection of souls suspended in an icy state of waiting. These hidden freezers, often deep within clinical basements, hold thousands of potential futures, waiting for a decision that may never come. They are a literal, clinical manifestation of the mythological river Styx, where the unborn wait silently. The rhythmic hum of the cryogenic tanks becomes the haunting soundtrack of these silent souls. The eventual decision to discard or donate these embryos is a heavy ethical burden, forcing people to play God with potential lives. It confirms a dark truth, that technology has allowed us to create life easily, but has not given us the wisdom to manage the consequences. This modern form of control over conception is a deep violation of natural order, acting as a powerful piece of foreshadowing for future ethical nightmares concerning the creation of life. The silent collapse. The use of chest tubes, large rigid tubes forced between the ribs into the chest cavity to drain air or fluid from a collapsed lung, is an acute, terrifying violation. It is a necessary act to force the breath back into a collapsing life, but the procedure is immediate, brutal, and relies on forcing a foreign object deep into the sacred space surrounding the heart and lungs. This is a moment of intense sensory immersion and violation. The insertion is often performed without full anesthesia, a sudden, sharp, agonizing act of clinical desperation. The tube becomes a physical manifestation of the breach, a constant throbbing reminder that the body's defenses have been violently penetrated. The sound of the suction machine pulling out the trapped air or blood is the chilling soundtrack of the body being forcibly healed, a grotesque, mechanical breath. For the days the tube remains in place, the patient is tethered to the external machine, their chest cavity open to the outside world. The removal is another violent step, often performed by pulling the tube rapidly while the patient holds their breath. This final, sharp removal is a profound physical repetition of the initial trauma, leaving behind a small, ragged, permanent scar, a lasting mark of the body's near-death experience. The chemical restraint. The use of chemical restraints, powerful tranquilizing drugs administered to subdue agitated or psychotic patients, is a modern-day straitjacket. It is a necessary safety measure, but the effect is profound. A person's mind is forcibly silenced, their consciousness chemically subdued, turning a vibrant, struggling self into a compliant, passive shell. This is a terrifying example of chemical submission. The drug takes away the ability to resist, leaving the patient trapped inside a body that no longer obeys the will. The mind remains, often in a fearful, confused haze, watching as the body is forced into a heavy, unmoving state. This involuntary surrender of control is a deep psychological horror, echoing the ancient fears of being poisoned or enchanted into eternal slumber. The resulting silence is a dramatic contrast between silence and revelation. The lingering question is always ethical. Where does safety end and control begin? The sheer power held by the syringe, the ability to instantly erase a person's agency, is a profound and terrifying responsibility. The knowledge that such power exists and is routinely used confirms a chilling truth that sometimes the easiest cure for chaos is simple, forceful, chemical obedience. The artificial void. The colostomy bag, a piece of plastic adhered to the abdomen to collect bodily waste after surgery, is a horrifying mark of the body's betrayal. It is a life-saving necessity, but it is a constant, visible reminder that the body's most private, silent processes have been externalized and mechanized. The patient must now live with a visible, external appendage that dictates their daily routine, a permanent violation of internal integrity. This apparatus acts as a modern cursed artifact. The surgery creates a permanent opening or stoma in the abdomen, a small, raw, moist piece of the intestine brought out to the surface. This physical alteration is a profound shock, transforming the body into a vulnerable, constantly exposed container. This externalized raw tissue is a constant source of fear and anxiety, a life-saving wound that can never be truly closed. This profound vulnerability is a powerful piece of foreshadowing for a life lived on the edge of dignity. The act of changing the bag, a silent, necessary ritual performed several times a day, is a constant, private humiliation. It reduces the body to its raw, elemental functions, stripping away the social graces that define us. This terrifying, repetitive necessity confirms a dark truth, that life saved by technology often requires an immense, silent sacrifice of the self. This is a recurring motif of repetition in the new, mechanical life. The bone's steel cage. The use of external fixation, installing a large, rigid frame of metal rods and clamps outside the body to hold severely shattered bones together, is a brutal, archaic-looking technique still widely used. It is a necessary cage built of steel, but it transforms the limb into a terrifying mechanical device where the metal rods pierce the skin and penetrate deep into the bone itself. This crude form of healing is a haunting echo of ancient fears of crude, violent repair. The frame, large and intimidating, is a visible, shocking symbol of the extremity of the injury. The patient must live with a piece of external scaffolding, their flesh pierced by rods that allow direct, frightening access to their deepest skeletal structure. The constant looming threat of infection at the entry points of the pins is a daily source of dread, an open door for darkness to enter the body's interior. This image embodies symbolic imagery of the body in a steel cage. The removal of the fixator, often after months of living within the steel cage, is a loud, agonizing event where the pins must be twisted and pulled from the living bone. It is a final, violent separation from the apparatus that sustained the limb. This necessary violence confirms a chilling truth, that sometimes the most sophisticated salvation requires a brutal, public sacrifice of the body's integrity. The stolen viscera. The ancient concept of removing an internal organ that has become evil or toxic remains shockingly modern in the form of the appendectomy or cholecystectomy, gallbladder removal. These are organs deemed non-essential, yet they are still parts of the self, removed completely, simply discarded, leaving behind a subtle internal void. This act reduces parts of the self to mere disposable toxic waste. This procedure touches on the mystery of the central question of what is truly essential to the self. The horror is not in the scar, but the fact that a complete living organ is simply taken and destroyed, deemed surplus to requirements. The removal leaves a permanent, subtle gap in the internal architecture, a hidden open loop where an organ once quietly performed its function. This clinical reduction of a complex internal body part to mere trash speaks to the cold, calculating nature of survival medicine. This common procedure forces a philosophical reckoning. If we can live without these parts, why were they created in the first place? The smooth, clinical removal belies the deeper, unsettling truth that the body is not a perfect temple, but a machine with redundant, sometimes fatal components that must be violently discarded. The discarded organs are a powerful piece of foreshadowing for the ultimate disposability of the body. The waking incision, local anesthesia, numbing a small area of the body while the patient remains fully conscious during the procedure, is a controlled horror. The mind is fully present, feeling the pressure and movement of the instruments, but the feeling of pain is surgically removed. It creates a frightening dichotomy. The patient is a witness to their own violation, trapped in a silent, tactile nightmare where they can feel, but not hurt. This is a profound example of sensory immersion. The unnerving sounds of the procedure, the crunch of the needle, the snip of the scissors, the scraping of the tools, are all amplified in the quiet room. The conscious mind processes every sound and vibration, even as the skin remains numb and compliant. This silent, forced observation of one's own physical trauma is a deep psychological invasion, transforming the operating room into a stage for a private, waking nightmare. This technique is a perfect illustration of the power of chemical control, demonstrating that pain is a simple chemical signal that can be easily silenced. The mind is left naked, able to observe the reality of its physical violation without the benefit of unconsciousness. The experience serves as a haunting reminder that control over the body's messages can be both a miracle and a chilling form of psychological exposure. The metal staples. The use of surgical staples to close deep internal wounds is a fundamentally primitive yet necessary act of metallic repair. Instead of careful organic stitching, metal shards are used to violently clamp the tissue together. This leaves a permanent internal pattern of cold, hard metal, transforming the healing body into a crudely repaired machine held together by industrial fasteners. This technique echoes the disturbing motif of the body as a haunted or cursed artifact. These tiny metallic staples remain in the body forever, silent, unmoving witnesses to the trauma. They're a permanent foreign object, a constant reminder of the failure that required them. The tissue is forced into an unnatural, compressed closure, prioritizing speed and structural integrity over the body's gentle healing processes. This reliance on brute metallic force speaks to a dark truth about emergency medicine. The thought of metal shards remaining permanently inside, scattered across a deep internal wound, is a subtle, constant psychological horror. It confirms that the line between healing and violation is often blurred, and that the body is simply a temporary vessel that can be patched with whatever means are necessary. This brutal finality is a profound example of contrast between silence and revelation, where the silence of the internal staples hides a violent repair. The bloodless surgery. The use of tourniquets and pressure cuffs to completely drain and isolate a limb from its blood supply during surgery is a controlled act of temporary death. The arm or leg is rendered pale and bloodless, a dead, limp entity, allowing the surgeon to operate in a clean field. This profound, deliberate interruption of life force is a terrifying glimpse into the fragility of circulation, turning the limb into a terrifying temporary ghost. This procedure embodies a deep open loop of existential uncertainty. The limb is effectively cut off from life, becoming a heavy, lifeless thing for the duration of the procedure. The mind is aware of the limb's chilling, bloodless state, creating a profound psychological disconnect between the brain and the extremity. This deliberate cessation of life flow is a subtle act of controlled destruction, where life is willingly and temporarily sacrificed to achieve a greater surgical goal. This is a dramatic use of contrast between the life-giving body and the temporary dead limb. When the cuff is released, the sudden, painful rush of blood back into the tissues is a profound, shocking return to sensation. This agonizing rush confirms the body's frantic struggle to reclaim the space that was so recently abandoned. The entire procedure is a controlled demonstration of the terrifying ease with which life can be withdrawn, and then, hopefully, returned, confirming a deep persistence of fear across time regarding the control of life force. The frozen flesh. The use of cryotherapy, blasting tissue, like warts or precancerous cells, with liquid nitrogen to deliberately freeze and destroy them, is a violent chemical destruction. This ancient method of using extreme cold to kill is now performed with precise technical control, but the principle is unchanged. Life is saved by inflicting a controlled, profound, internal freeze burn. This procedure utilizes the whispers of ancient fears surrounding the power of elemental forces. The liquid nitrogen is applied with the sound of hissing steam, instantly turning the treated tissue white and rock hard. The body's natural response is a sharp, shocking sting, followed by a terrifying numbness. The freezing process bursts the cells from the inside, a quiet, cellular detonation that achieves its cure through aggressive, targeted destruction. This silent violence reveals the profound fragility of the body's microscopic structures. The aftermath is a deep, painful blister, followed by the slow, horrifying sloughing off of the dead, frozen tissue. This forced shedding is a visceral reminder that healing sometimes requires the deliberate killing and expulsion of a part of the self. This primitive, elemental act of freezing and subsequent decay confirms a dark truth: that life often must be renewed through a controlled process of death and destruction. The whispering injection, transition. The final horror of this section is the simple, silent intravenous injection, the direct portal into the bloodstream. This is the ultimate symbol of chemical power, the ability to bypass all natural defenses and deliver a profound chemical command directly to the core of life. The needle is a tiny, perfect breach of the body's final perimeter, a cold, sharp intrusion that holds the power of life, death, or control. This act serves as a powerful transition to the next section focusing on the mind's prison. The quick, sharp sting is a fleeting moment of pain, but the psychological weight of the needle, the direct violation of the bloodstream, is immense. The injection is a silent, secretive transaction where a powerful, unseen liquid is surrendered to the currents of the body. This tiny act of submission is performed millions of times a day, yet each one is a terrifying surrender of the self to an unknown chemical command. This constant ritual of chemical insertion is a subtle, yet profound act of chemical obedience. It teaches the body and the mind to accept the silent intrusion of powerful outside forces. The needle is the key, opening the door not just to blood, but to the mind itself, setting the stage for the next section where chemicals and electricity are used to control consciousness. The blade's quiet promise. The horrifying shadow of the lobotomy, a procedure designed to cut away the deepest parts of personality, still lingers in modern psychiatric care. While the crude ice pick has been banished, the underlying desire to solve mental distress with physical destruction persists. Today, this impulse manifests in highly precise, computer-guided neurosurgical lesions, tiny, deliberate acts of cutting the conscious mind. The horror remains, the belief that to cure the mind, a piece of the self must be sacrificed. These modern forms of psychosurgery target only the smallest, most specific clusters of neural connections, but the ethical terror is unchanged. It is an act of chemical submission that is permanent, a chilling choice to violently reorganize the physical structure of a person's inner world. The patient is no longer the person they were, but a new, quieter, chemically or physically corrected version. This quiet violation embodies a deep, unnerving hidden horror disguised by technical sophistication. This decision forces a terrible question. Is it better to exist in peace with a missing piece of your consciousness, or to suffer fully intact? The terrifying allure of the quiet life, achieved by destroying the core of one's own identity, is a profound confrontation with the limits of suffering. This permanent alteration of the brain structure acts as a haunting, cursed artifact, a beautiful but tragic solution that marks the mind forever. The electric silence. The use of electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, where a controlled seizure is intentionally triggered in the brain with a burst of electricity, remains a profound and terrifying practice. This controlled fire is meant to reset the mind, but the physical act is a violent mechanical violation. The patient is intentionally forced into a massive brain-wide storm, relying on the ensuing silence to bring a desperate, fragile peace. This procedure deeply explores the interplay of light and darkness. The patient is given muscle relaxants to prevent the outward physical violence of the seizure, making the internal storm even more unnerving. The mind undergoes a silent, profound electrical trauma, while the body remains still. This contrast between the quiet outside and the chaotic internal landscape is a chilling truth. The patient becomes a peaceful vessel for an unseen, massive electrical discharge. This hidden violation is a powerful contrast between silence and revelation. The lingering side effect of ECT is often a patchy, unsettling loss of memory, turning large chunks of a person's past into blank, unreachable territory. The cure is achieved by the theft of memory, creating gaps in the self that can never be fully restored. This forced forgetting is a terrible price for stability, confirming that the solution often requires the destruction of the deepest parts of one's own history. The chemical shadow. The reliance on heavy antipsychotic drugs to manage severe mental illness is a constant, subtle form of chemical containment. These powerful compounds do not cure, they simply create a profound chemical shadow over the mind, muting the loud voices of psychosis but also dampening the spark of the self. This forced normalization is a terrifying, continuous exercise in chemical submission. The terror lies in the trade-off. In exchange for stability, the patient accepts a diminished version of their own personality. The world is muted, emotions are flat, and spontaneity is suppressed. This constant state of chemical control reduces the mind to its most compliant level, transforming the vibrant, if troubled, person into a manageable, regulated entity. The rhythmic dosing becomes a terrifying repetition that defines the patient's new, quiet life. The long-term effects of these drugs, including involuntary restless movements or metabolic shutdown, act as a constant physical reminder of the mind's subjugation. The body itself bears the mark of the forced peace, turning into a reluctant accomplice in the chemical obedience. This chilling reality confirms that the price of silencing the inner chaos is often a lifelong externalized payment of physical decline. The wires of will. The use of deep brain stimulation, DBS, implanting permanent electrodes deep inside the brain to control severe tremors or obsessive disorders, is a stunning, quiet horror. It forces us to confront the fact that our own free will can be governed by a remote-controlled electrical pulse. The mind is reduced to an electrical circuit, and the deepest parts of consciousness are handed over to an external programmer. This device is a modern, sophisticated, cursed artifact. The surgery is profoundly invasive, requiring the implantation of thin, wire-like electrodes into the most mysterious parts of the brain. These wires remain there forever, leading back to a small, battery-powered pack implanted in the chest. The patient is literally hardwired to an external power source, their thoughts and movements now dependent on a constant electrical command. This technological marriage is an unnerving vision of the future of the self. The doctor, or technician, holds the terrifying power to adjust the patient's entire demeanor with a handheld remote control, slowing a tremor or altering a mood with a flick of a switch. This terrifying, easy control confirms that the essence of self is merely a complex set of electrical patterns that can be edited and manipulated. This is a profound, existential, rhetorical question about the nature of free will. The forced awake. The clinical use of sleep studies, monitoring a patient's sleep with dozens of wires and sensors attached to the body, is a horrifying, controlled form of sensory violation. Sleep, the final bastion of privacy, is invaded by technology, turning a deep primal necessity into a monitored performance. The patient is prevented from true rest by the sheer awareness that every twitch, every breath, every brainwave is being catalogued and analysed. This creates a deep open loop of observation. The patient is covered in a web of cold, metallic electrodes and wires, transforming them into a living, data-emitting machine. This dense network of sensors makes the patient hyper-aware of their own physical processes, turning the natural act of falling unconscious into a self-conscious struggle. The room is dark, but the cold, blinking lights of the monitors are a constant, silent presence, observing the private descent into rest. This intrusion into the subconscious confirms a deep societal fear that the mind can never truly be unobserved. The hidden life of the brain, the secrets of its restorative silence, are captured on paper and screen, forcing the subconscious to perform for a cold, unfeeling audience. This is a disturbing example of symbolic imagery, where the wires represent the intrusion of the waking world into the dream world, the hidden transmitter. The use of capsule endoscopy, where a patient swallows a tiny blinking camera that travels through the entire digestive tract, is a quiet technological horror. The body is turned into a temporary mobile film studio, hosting a foreign mechanical observer that transmits the secrets of the viscera. This process is a high-tech violation of the body's ultimate internal privacy. This device is a true cursed artifact that holds secrets. The patient lives for a day with the camera transmitting continuous footage of their deepest, most private internal pathways to a receiver worn on a belt. The knowledge that a mechanical eye is drifting through their interior world, recording its darkest secrets, is a profound psychological invasion. This transforms the silent internal processes of the body into a public, observable film strip. The final horror is the camera's expulsion. The small, powerful recording device is simply discarded, having completed its journey and collected its secrets. This quiet, clinical disposability of the high-tech observer reinforces the chilling truth that the body can be easily and briefly invaded, recorded, and then abandoned by the technology that saved it. This journey is a metaphor for the mystery of the internal landscape. The amnesiac gas. The gas used in dentistry and minor surgery to induce amnesia, creating a temporary intentional blackout of a traumatic event, is a subtle, chemical violation of personal history. The patient remains physically present, compliant, and often responsive, but the memory of the trauma is chemically erased. This procedure confirms the terrifying ease with which reality can be edited by chemical means. This is a terrifying example of chemical submission. The forced memory loss is a dark, necessary trick. The mind is made to forget the pain and the fear, ensuring that the body returns to the surgery without the burden of conscious trauma. But the mind knows it has been tampered with. The knowledge that a period of time is simply missing creates an unsettling existential void. This open loop of missing time is a profound psychological scar. The patient wakes with a sense of unease, realizing that they were an actor in their own life, performing actions that their consciousness has no record of. This loss of personal history, however brief, is a chilling demonstration of chemical control over the deepest parts of the self. The sweet, sickly smell of the gas acts as a sensory immersion into the moment of surrender. The nerve's silence. The use of nerve blocks, injecting strong anesthetics directly onto a major nerve cluster to shut down all sensation in a large region, is a controlled yet profound act of sensory amputation. The limb or area is not just numb, it is chemically silenced, rendered temporarily dead to the world, unable to send messages of pain or feeling. This deliberate sensory destruction is a terrifying preview of permanent loss. The deep, unsettling numbness that follows the injection is absolute. The limb can be violently manipulated, yet the mind registers no pain, only the chilling feeling of pressure and distance. The patient watches their own limb being forcefully handled, an external object that no longer reports to the self. This forced detachment is a psychological horror, turning the body into a separate, unfeeling entity. When the block finally wears off, the excruciating, chaotic return of sensation, the pins and needles, is a violent rebirth, a painful signal that the nerve has begun to live again. This excruciating process confirms a dark truth, that the body's internal rebellion against the chemical silence is often agonizing. This return to life is a profound repetition of the body's defiant struggle for communication. The chemical straitjacket. The use of sedation for imaging, giving powerful tranquilizers to children or claustrophobic adults to keep them still inside the humming, confined space of an MRI machine, is a necessary deception. The machine itself is a terrifying closed box, and the only way to get the body to comply is through a powerful chemical surrender. The patient is chemically forced into a state of docile obedience. The sheer mechanical noise of the MRI machine, a relentless, loud, rhythmic banging, is the frightening soundtrack of this technological confinement. The patient, chemically subdued, is placed alone inside the tight, cold tube, leaving them defenseless against the sensory assault. The body is trapped, rendered unmoving by the drugs, while the machine violently scans the secrets of the internal self. This ritual of forced compliance confirms a disturbing truth, that technology often requires the body to be chemically silenced to achieve its goals. The machine is given priority over the mind's comfort, and the price of diagnostic insight is the temporary theft of consciousness. This scenario is a powerful piece of foreshadowing for a future where technology demands chemical submission. The forced confession. The occasional clinical use of sodium amytal, colloquially known as a truth serum, is a terrifying violation of the deepest parts of the self. While not used to magically reveal absolute truth, the drug does weaken the mind's defenses, forcing a state of profound emotional and verbal vulnerability. The patient is chemically coerced into a state of openness, blurring the line between therapy and involuntary interrogation. The effect is a chilling demonstration of chemical control. The mind's ability to censor, guard, and choose its words is suddenly dissolved, leaving the patient painfully exposed. The boundaries between the self and the external world collapse, forcing a kind of psychological nakedness. The doctor holds the terrifying power to chemically unlock the mind's most guarded secrets. This procedure, however rare, serves as a haunting reminder of the ancient fear of magical compulsion. The drug is the modern spell, forcing the will to surrender and reveal its deepest thoughts. The ethical complexity of this procedure is immense, confirming the dark truth that the greatest human desire, the truth, is sometimes obtained through a profound act of chemical coercion. The implanted rhythm, progression, the use of vagus nerve stimulation, VNS, implanting a small device under the skin of the chest that sends regular electrical pulses to the vagus nerve in the neck, is a subtle, permanent attempt to govern mood and behavior. The patient's emotional life is literally wired to a battery-powered rhythm, a constant, quiet, electrical command attempting to soothe the chaos within. This device acts as a profound, internal symbolic imagery of the subjugated mind. The procedure is a permanent intrusion. A small surgical cut is made in the neck to access the nerve, and the wire is wrapped around it, leading back to the metal pulse generator. The patient carries this foreign electrical apparatus forever, a hidden, constant reminder that their natural internal rhythm is not trustworthy and must be corrected by machine. This chilling dependence echoes the myth of the externally held heart or soul. The constant low-level electric pulse is a subtle act of forced obedience, a constant mechanical whisper telling the brain how to behave. This electrical repetition becomes the new, forced normal, governing the patient's darkest moods and highest anxieties. This fact acts as a perfect transition into the next section, confirming that the solution to mental distress often involves permanent technologically governed violation. The chemical veil. The use of powerful general anesthesia during labour and delivery, while rare now, still carries the chilling historical shadow of completely erasing the mother's memory of childbirth. The procedure steals the primal, profound experience of giving birth, exchanging conscious memory for physical comfort. The mother is awake and present for the pain of labour, then chemically silenced for the moment of birth itself, a profound theft of personal history. This erasure of the moment of creation is a fundamental violation of the most powerful human experience. The mother wakes to find the baby already there, a profound sense of temporal displacement and loss hanging over the event. The memory of the birth, the screams, the pain, the first sight, is simply an open loop, a black hole in her consciousness. This chemical intervention confirms a dark truth, that the body can be chemically coerced into forgetting its own deepest trauma. The doctor, or the chemical itself, holds the power to rewrite the patient's past, leaving behind a subtle, unsettling emptiness where a defining memory should reside. The subsequent stories told by family members must fill the void, creating a reality that the mother never consciously witnessed. This terrifying form of chemical submission suggests that convenience often triumphs over the integrity of personal experience. The shock's precision. The clinical use of defibrillators, the application of immense electrical current directly to the chest, is a modern, refined act of violent intervention. When the heart fails, a massive jolt is used to forcibly restart the core of life, a shocking intrusion that stops death with electric violence. The procedure is life-saving, but it is a moment of profound, controlled brutality, relying on a system-wide shock to force obedience. The terror of the defibrillation lies in its sudden, explosive violence. The body jerks and spasms against its will as the high-voltage current tears through the chest cavity, The patient, often conscious or semi-aware, experiences a moment of profound sensory assault. This is a terrifying elemental confrontation with the interplay of light and darkness, where a sudden flash of electricity is the only force capable of drawing life back from the absolute void. The electric shock leaves an internal memory on the heart muscle and often external burn marks on the skin. These physical scars are a permanent testament to the body's near-death experience, a frightening reminder that life was brought back through brute force. This recurring motif of repetition in the violence confirms that life, once lost, is often only regained through the most shocking and painful means imaginable. The silent scanner. The use of ultrasound technology, which penetrates the body with sound waves to reveal internal structures, is a quiet, non-invasive horror. It is an unseen violation, where the deepest parts of the body are made visible through a cold, unfeeling mechanical process. The body is passively exposed, its internal secrets laid bare for the cold, unblinking gaze of the machine. This technology embodies symbolic imagery of the invisible eye of surveillance. The handheld transducer, slick with cold gel, slides over the skin, acting as the interface between the living self and the mechanical observer. The faint, high-pitched clicks are the only sound of the invasion, but the image displayed on the monitor reveals the profound truth of the internal landscape. The body is transformed into a transparent object, its internal complexity reduced to a grayscale shadow on a screen. This silent routine violation confirms a deep modern fear that technology can penetrate all physical barriers without leaving a mark, stealing the body's internal mystery. The patient is powerless to stop the gaze, forced to accept the complete exposure of their inner self. This is a profound, subtle act of surrender, where the body's entire hidden geography is freely and routinely mapped. The spine's theft. The lumbar puncture, or spinal tap, is a procedure that requires forcing a long, sharp needle deep between the vertebrae to extract the clear, vital fluid that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. It is a profound violation of the most guarded internal space, the core of the nervous system. The deliberate, careful penetration of this final defense feels like a profound and ancient act of theft, stealing the body's deepest essence. The patient is forced into a fetal curl, making them vulnerable, while the long needle searches blindly for the fragile gap in the bone. The knowledge that the needle is probing the very center of their being, the nexus of all sensation, creates intense psychological and physical dread. The extraction of the fluid is a quiet, profound act, a draining of the brain's own mysterious life liquid. The aftermath often involves debilitating headaches, a constant physical reminder that the barrier has been breached and the protective fluid stolen. The lingering pain is a chilling echo of the initial trauma, confirming a deep fear that some invasive procedures leave a scar not just on the flesh, but on the delicate internal pressure systems that govern consciousness. This lingering effect creates an open loop of physical uncertainty. The chemical flood. The delivery of chemotherapy is the ultimate act of chemical terrorism against the self, flooding the entire body with a powerful toxic poison designed to kill dividing cells, both cancerous and healthy. It is a necessary horror, relying on the hope that the toxic dose will destroy the illness before it destroys the host. The patient is willingly poisoned, accepting the internal chemical chaos as the price of survival. This procedure touches on the mystery of chemical warfare within the body. The infusion of the chemical is a silent, profound invasion, turning the patient's entire circulatory system into a battlefield. The subsequent nausea, pain, and hair loss are the external, visible signs of the internal, violent war being waged by the powerful poison. The patient becomes a haunted location, filled with a toxic, cleansing force that seeks to strip the self down to its bare, struggling core. The sheer violence of the cure confirms a dark, ancient truth, that the ultimate fight for life requires a period of willing self-destruction. The body must be brought to the brink of death and back again, accepting profound illness as the cost of potential salvation. This terrifying process of destruction and rebirth is a constant, agonizing repetition of the ultimate struggle. The cold-blooded sleep. The controlled lowering of a patient's blood pressure and core temperature during complex surgeries is a quiet, profound act of physiological surrender. The body is placed into a state of deep mechanical calm, slowing the heart and brain to protect them from the stress of the trauma. This calculated coldness is a forced pause of life, turning the patient into a still, heavy object waiting for the moment of repair. The body's natural life signs are suppressed, replaced by the cold, rhythmic beeps of the machine, which dictates the artificial pace of life. This deliberate slowing of the internal clock echoes the myth of suspended animation, where life is held hostage by an external force. The patient is placed on the threshold of death, a profound psychological gamble where the mind must trust technology to guide it back to life. The entire process is a demonstration of the terrifying degree of control technology now holds over the core elements of life. The machine determines the very definition of alive for the duration of the surgery, turning the patient into a passive, compliant passenger on their own life and death journey. This chilling vulnerability confirms a recurring motif of foreshadowing, the body's ultimate dependence on the machine. The pins stare. The use of the halo vest, a heavy metal, ring screwed directly into the patient's skull and attached to a rigid vest, is a barbaric-looking apparatus still used to stabilize severe neck and spinal injuries. The terror is immediate. The sharp metal pins penetrate the skin and bone, forcing the head into complete rigid stillness. This apparatus is a terrifying visible mark of the body's utter failure. The halo vest transforms the head into a haunted artifact, a terrifying crown of thorns made of cold clinical steel. The patient must live within this metal cage for months, unable to move the most essential part of their body. The pins, sunk deep into the skull, are a constant source of pain, a physical reminder of the intrusion of the metal. This permanent visible intrusion is a profound symbolic imagery of technological imprisonment. The fear of infection at the 4 screw sites is a daily terror, confirming that the solution itself is a source of constant danger. The act of turning the screws, tightening the device further into the skull, is a necessary violence that confirms the body must be brutally forced into alignment. This procedure is a chilling reminder of the persistence of fear across time regarding the breaking of the skeletal structure. The internal patch. The use of surgical mesh, often made of plastic or metal fibers, to repair hernias or reinforce tissues, is a necessary internal intrusion that acts as a permanent foreign scaffold inside the body. This material is literally woven into the living flesh, a permanent internal patch that the body must reluctantly accept. The self is saved by being permanently and internally repaired with an unfeeling synthetic material. The terror lies in the permanence of the foreign object, a piece of industrial material living silently within the warm organic core of the body. The mesh is intended to be absorbed, but often remains as a constant, subtle source of internal irritation and potential chronic pain. This physical insertion confirms the profound paradox that salvation often relies on the body's acceptance of a constant internal irritant. The psychological weight of knowing an unfeeling plastic net is permanently woven into your deepest structures is immense. It transforms the body into a repaired machine, a canvas where synthetic materials are used to shore up organic failure. This internal violation, unseen but ever present, is a constant secret violation that confirms the line between healing and becoming a cursed artifact is terrifyingly thin. The chemical obedience. The chronic use of benzodiazepines, powerful anti-anxiety drugs, is a subtle, widespread form of chemical submission. These pills do not solve anxiety. They simply force the mind into a state of artificial calm, suppressing the body's natural fear response. The person is rendered emotionally compliant, their true self buried beneath a quiet chemical blanket of forced peace. The insidious horror is the rapid onset of dependence. The body quickly learns to rely on the chemical peace, leaving the patient terrified of the return of their natural state. This reliance creates a perpetual unnerving cycle where stability is only possible through constant rhythmic chemical ingestion. The pill bottle becomes a haunted artifact, holding the key to both peace and enslavement. This chemical control confirms a dark truth about modern life, that we prefer the manufactured calm over the messy reality of true human emotion. The pill silences the fear, but it also silences the courage and the sharp edges of the self. The patient willingly enters a state of perpetual emotional disarmament, accepting chemical obedience as the price of daily functionality. The veins prison. The necessity of a permanent vascular access port, a small device surgically implanted under the skin, often in the chest, with a tube leading directly into a major vein, is a continuous subtle violation. This is the body's surrender to technology, creating a permanent easy portal for the constant rhythmic infusion of drugs, toxins, and fluids. The self is constantly on call, ready for chemical invasion. The port is a hidden, cold object, its outline barely visible beneath the skin, but its function is terrifying. It transforms the body into a docking station for medicine. It strips away the small defense of the vein wall, creating a direct, frictionless highway into the deepest core of the life force. This permanent intrusion confirms a profound foreshadowing of a life spent in constant technological submission. The act of accessing the port, piercing the skin and the self-sealing membrane with a needle, is a constant small ritual of violation. The patient accepts this rhythmic intrusion as the price of survival, confirming a chilling truth, that to live, the body must accept its permanent role as a controlled, accessible machine. This regular violation is a profound repetition of necessary submission. The silent theft of sight, transition. The use of corneal transplantation, where the damaged clear window of the eye is replaced with the tissue of a deceased stranger, is a profound and terrifying act of borrowed life. Sight is saved, but the patient must accept that they are now seeing the world through the cells of the dead. This profound merger of life and death is a subtle, existential horror. The act of replacing the cornea, a tiny, precise piece of the self, is a philosophical violation, forcing the patient to accept a living piece of a stranger into their most intimate sense. The boundary between self and other is permanently blurred, leaving the patient to wonder if the quality of their new sight carries a subtle echo of the donor's experience. This is a powerful, visual mystery about the nature of the self. This procedure confirms that to repair the most delicate parts of the human form, we must turn to the body of the deceased, making a chilling bargain for vision. This final fact concludes the section on the minds, prisoned by focusing on the senses, preparing for the transition to the next arc that examines the body's compliance. The voice's obedience. The modern practice of voice therapy to physically alter a person's pitch, tone, or gender expression is a subtle, social horror. It requires the patient to deliberately destroy and rebuild the most fundamental part of their audible self. The voice, the carrier of identity and command, is forcibly changed, often requiring months of painful exercises or even surgical alteration of the vocal cords. This process is a deep psychological violation of the core self. The patient is taught to suppress their natural voice, treating it as an enemy to be silenced, and to forcibly construct a new artificial cadence. This act of self-erasure relies on the belief that external compliance is more important than internal truth. The ultimate goal is to achieve social peace by abandoning the authentic sound of one's own identity. This profound act of self-betrayal is a chilling example of chemical submission to social norms. When the new voice finally emerges, it is a triumph of will, but it is also a permanent mark of the struggle, a constant, audible reminder that the deepest part of the self had to be surgically or structurally altered to be accepted by the outside world. This deliberate alteration of the primary method of communication acts as a chilling, audible, cursed artifact, a new voice bought at the price of the old self. The blood's purge. The medical use of plasmapheresis, where the patient's blood is mechanically separated into its components, the plasma containing harmful antibodies is discarded, and the remaining cells are mixed with synthetic fluid and returned, is a terrifying act of internal cleansing. This procedure treats the patient's own blood as toxic, requiring it to be forcefully purged and diluted. It is a necessary act, but it touches on the ancient horror of bodily corruption. The patient is hooked up to a complex cold machine that methodically drains the crimson fluid, strips it down to its essence, and returns a diluted artificial version. This continuous exchange is a chilling, quiet demonstration of the body's betrayal, turning the vital life fluid into a problem that must be filtered by technology. This process is a constant, unnerving repetition of the body's inability to self-regulate, This subtle violence forces the patient to rely on an external machine to perform the sacred function of purifying the self. The discarded plasma, a collection of the body's own internal secrets and failures, is thrown away like toxic waste. This profound, regular draining and dilution of the life force confirms a deep truth, that technology's victory often requires the ultimate, humiliating surrender of the body's autonomy. The chemical sleepwalk. The use of hypnotic sedatives, strong sleeping pills, to force a troubled mind into oblivion is a quiet, nightly horror. The chemical does not solve the underlying anxiety. It simply forces the brain into a state of unconsciousness, turning the natural act of rest into a chemically controlled surrender. This nightly ritual is a frightening demonstration of the mind's reliance on chemical coercion. The terror lies in the dependence. The mind forgets how to turn off naturally, relying instead on the sudden, chemical hammer of the drug. The line between natural rest and chemical blackout is profound and disturbing, transforming sleep into a state of forced chemical obedience. The body becomes a passive vessel, pushed into an unconscious state by an external, unfeeling chemical command. The mind knows that the rest is artificial, bought at the cost of chemical reliance, creating an unsettling open loop of uncertainty about the integrity of the natural self. This constant nightly surrender confirms a deeper truth, that when the mind cannot find peace on its own, modern medicine's most common answer is simply to chemically silence the conscious self until morning. The jaw's prison. The necessity of jaw wiring, forcing the mouth completely shut with metal bands and wires, is a profound, temporary violation of autonomy. Used for extreme trauma or corrective surgery, this act transforms the mouth, the gateway of speech, breath, and food, into a rigid metal prison. The patient is instantly deprived of the most basic human functions, reduced to sipping liquid sustenance through the teeth. The physical act of having the jaw forcibly locked down by cold metal is a terror. The mouth, the source of communication and sustenance, becomes a fixed, silent entity. The patient is trapped within their own skull, their most expressive feature rendered mute. This isolation confirms a deep primal fear, the fear of being unable to speak, breathe, or cry for help. The hidden horror rests in the ever-present threat of vomiting, the terrifying knowledge that if the patient becomes sick, they could easily choke on their own expelled contents, trapped by the wires. The small wire cutters that must be carried at all times act as a constant, subtle reminder of the life or death scenario they inhabit. This metal apparatus is a horrifying symbolic imagery of forced silence and imprisonment. The controlled fever. The therapeutic use of hypothermia, deliberately raising the patient's body temperature to a high fever state, is a controlled, yet brutal confrontation with elemental heat. This technique, used to enhance the effect of radiation or to kill cancer cells, forces the body to the absolute limit of its endurance. The patient is willingly pushed toward the kind of life-threatening heat that would normally signify utter biological collapse. The patient is chemically paralyzed and mechanically heated, their core temperature pushed dangerously high. This deliberate forced fever is a horrifying echo of ancient spiritual purifications or ordeals by fire. The body becomes a haunted location, filled with a powerful burning force that seeks to cleanse through sheer heat, confirming the whispers of ancient fears regarding elemental violence. The terror lies in the fragility of the balance. The patient is maintained at the absolute threshold of heat exhaustion, relying entirely on the precision of the machine to keep the forced fever from becoming lethal. This fine line between cure and death confirms a disturbing truth, that sometimes the only way to defeat a primal disease is through a confrontation with a primal, violent force. The skin's submission. The routine use of steroids to suppress the body's autoimmune response is a continuous, subtle act of forced biological submission. These drugs mute the body's frantic defensive systems, forcing a truce with a chronic illness. The cure relies on chemically forcing the body to stop fighting itself, accepting a state of profound artificial calm. This is an unnerving act of chemical submission to an external command. The consequence is a body rendered permanently vulnerable, its strongest defenses chemically hobbled. The patient lives in the constant tension of remission, knowing that any small infection can quickly become life-threatening due to the suppressed immune system. The patient is traded a greater pain for a greater vulnerability, confirming a profound and disturbing paradox in the pursuit of peace. The long-term side effects, like the thinning of the skin or the weakening of the bones, are the physical marks of this internal chemical war. The body pays a slow, agonizing price for the temporary peace, bearing the mark of its forced truce. This chilling reality confirms that the price of silencing internal chaos is a permanent systemic weakening of the self. The body's external heart. The necessity of ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, a machine that bypasses the heart and lungs, taking over the life force and breathing functions, is the ultimate terrifying surrender to technology. The patient's entire circulation is externally controlled, their blood pumped and oxygenated by a machine outside their body. Life is literally held captive by a cold, humming electrical apparatus. The sheer mass of tubes and machines surrounding the patient, all controlling the flow of their lifeblood, transforms the body into a fragile exposed engine. The blood, warmed and oxygenated outside the body, is returned, completing a chilling mechanical cycle. The patient is a still, passive passenger on their own mechanical existence, utterly dependent on the constant, vigilant hum of the machine. The ultimate horror is the thin, fragile tubing carrying all the patient's blood outside the body. A single leak, a loose connection, a mechanical failure, and life is instantly drained. This extreme vulnerability confirms a profound truth about survival: that technology, while offering salvation, also introduces a profound existential risk that is constantly managed in a state of high tension. The bone's violation. The practice of bone marrow biopsy, where a long sharp needle is drilled directly into the core of a large bone, often the hip, to extract living tissue, is a primal violation of the body's source of life. The extraction of this deep, fundamental substance is a necessary diagnostic tool, but the sensation of the drill biting into the bone is a deep psychological horror. The drilling is a violent, unnerving act that bypasses all soft tissue defenses, reaching the core structure of the self. The audible grinding and the final sucking pull of the syringe as it extracts the living marrow is a profound sensory violation. The pain, often a deep, persistent ache, is a chilling reminder that the body's most basic structure has been intentionally violated. The psychological weight of this deep intrusion confirms a haunting truth: that to understand the disease, the body's very source of creation must be physically invaded and sampled. The needle is a cold, metallic spy, bringing the deepest secret of the skeletal structure out into the sterile light. This brutal necessity confirms the persistence of fear across time regarding the invasion of the body's core. The toxic cleanse. The routine use of bowel preparations, powerful chemical laxatives designed to completely empty the entire digestive tract before colonoscopy or surgery, is a chemical violation of the body's internal defenses. The patient is forced into a state of profound, uncontrollable internal chaos, where the body's natural waste systems are violently overwhelmed by chemical commands. The forced chemical purge is a brutal, agonizing process that strips the internal walls bare, leaving the patient weak, exhausted, and completely hollowed out. The body is rendered utterly compliant to the chemical command, its entire internal landscape forcibly cleansed. This is a profound yet necessary act of chemical purification before the body can be technologically invaded. This enforced cleansing ritual confirms a disturbing truth: that to achieve the necessary sterile access, the body must first be chemically violated and emptied of all its contents. The patient willingly submits to this agony, accepting the humiliation and exhaustion as the price of diagnostic truth. This ritual of forced cleansing embodies sensory immersion into physical humiliation. The voice's terror. The use of a laryngoscope, a hard, curved metal blade forcibly inserted down the throat to gain visual access to the vocal cords, is a profound, sudden act of physical violation. Often done to guide a breathing tube, the procedure requires pushing the instrument past the tongue and down toward the airway, triggering the body's most intense, primal gag reflex. The patient is consciously or semi-consciously forced to endure the agonizing sensation of the large, cold metal instrument invading the most sensitive internal passage. The momentary crushing of the gag reflex, the body's final defense against choking, is a terrifying experience of involuntary physical submission. The sheer, deliberate force required confirms the violence of the necessary intervention. This terrifying invasion of the airway confirms a deep fear that the very ability to breathe and speak can be easily and violently compromised by technology. The large, brutal instrument, a metal wedge, is a shocking reminder that life-saving measures are often terrifyingly primitive in their application, relying on pure physical force to gain access to the core of the self. The permanent lock, transition, the use of surgical screws, plates and rods to permanently fuse bones or hold fractures together is a final, technological submission. The body is repaired not by its own soft biology, but by cold, hard pieces of titanium and steel that will remain internal foreign objects forever. The ultimate expression of modern healing is to become permanently part machine. The patient is now structurally dependent on the cold metal inside their body. The spine held rigid by rods, the jaw by plates, the hip by screws. This permanent internal jewelry is a constant physical reminder of the body's fracture and the necessary mechanical intervention. The self is saved by being irrevocably marked and maintained by unfeeling technology. This final fact concludes the arc of the mind's prison by focusing on the permanent material sacrifice of the self to technology. The reliance on metal to hold the body's structure together acts as a powerful transition to the final arc, which will explore the body's ultimate total surrender to the external world. The life's exchange. The chilling necessity of organ transplantation is the ultimate bargain with death, accepting a piece of a deceased stranger to allow one's own life to continue. The body is forcibly reopened to receive a cold, unfamiliar organ, and life is saved by consuming the remains of another. This ritual of replacement transforms the body into a terrifying mosaic, a blend of the self and the unknown dead. This act embodies the persistence of fear across time regarding cannibalism and the absorption of another's essence. The profound psychological weight is immense, the knowledge that the new heart or liver carries the unseen history of the donor. The recipient lives in the tension of gratitude and violation, forever tethered to the trauma that provided their salvation. The foreign organ is a powerful living cursed artifact, a sacred gift that simultaneously confirms the ultimate fragility of the body's organic perfection. The lifelong requirement for powerful immunosuppressive drugs, which prevent the body from violently rejecting the foreign part, confirms a dark truth. The body must be chemically convinced every single day to stop fighting its own salvation. This perpetual chemical truce transforms the patient into a vulnerable host, forever reliant on medicine to keep the boundary between self and non-self blurred. The machine's clock. The use of dialysis, where a patient's blood is routed through a machine for hours, 3 times a week, to mimic the failed function of the kidneys, is a terrifying life sentence to technological dependence. The patient's life rhythm is forcibly synchronized to the schedule of the machine, transforming the core function of waste removal into a mechanical ritual. The body is fundamentally surrendered to a schedule dictated by metal and plastic. The continuous, forceful removal and return of the blood is a profound violation of the life force, making the body utterly reliant on an external system to stay clean. The patient is reduced to a passive open portal, watching as their lifeblood is purified and returned by the cold, humming apparatus. The steady thrum of the dialysis pump becomes the chilling soundtrack of their new, mechanized life. This rhythmic, unrelenting dependence confirms a horrifying truth, that salvation sometimes requires the body to be turned into a compliant, scheduled machine. The subtle exhaustion and slow, creeping realization of this utter dependence create a profound, open loop of existential dread, confirming the ultimate price of borrowed time. The bloods freeze. The voluntary process of cryopreservation, freezing one's own eggs, sperm or embryos, is a chilling attempt to cheat the finality of biological time. It is a profound act of self-disembodiment, where the potential for life is extracted and held in suspended animation, waiting in a frozen liquid nitrogen grave for an undetermined future. The promise of immortality is reduced to a small, cold clinical vial. The sheer technological hubris of this act is a subtle horror, believing that a future technology will be capable of restarting the biological clock that we ourselves have paused. The life essence is removed from the warmth of the body and stored in a state of absolute chilling stillness, a true modern-day echo of the ancient fears of eternal winter or suspended animation. These hidden cryogenic vaults, filled with thousands of frozen futures, are a constant, silent testament to our deepest fear of biological finality. The frozen cells are a powerful symbolic imagery of hope and hubris, confirming a dark truth, that the ultimate defiance of death is found not in spiritual rebirth, but in cold, scientific suspension, with an outcome that is perpetually uncertain. The artificial breath. The use of a ventilator, a machine that takes over the sacred primal function of breathing by forcing air into the lungs, is a terrifying act of total physiological submission. The machine dictates the pace and depth of every breath, reducing the patient to a passive object. This forced rhythmic respiration transforms the breath, the very essence of life, into a mechanically controlled event. The terror is profound. The body is forced to inhale and exhale against its own will, a constant mechanical invasion of the airway. The ventilators hissing and clicking become the cold, rhythmic heartbeat of the machine that holds the patient captive. This technology confirms a deep truth about mortality, that life can be maintained even when the will to breathe has failed. For the conscious or semi-conscious patient, the ventilator is the ultimate prison, a device that saves life by robbing the self of its most basic autonomy. This mechanical control over the most fundamental act of life is a haunting foreshadowing of the total dependence required for survival, embodying the ultimate surrender to external force. The chemical obedience. The modern use of insulin, a powerful hormone externally synthesized and introduced to regulate the core metabolism, is a daily chemical dependence. The body's inability to regulate its own vital fuel forces a lifelong submission to a cold, frequent injection schedule. Life is saved, but the patient is perpetually tethered to a synthetic chemical command. The constant rhythmic testing of blood sugar and the necessary precise injections become a life-defining ritual of repetition. The patient must constantly monitor and intervene, trusting the manufactured hormone to perform the sacred function that their own body has abandoned. This continuous technological intervention transforms the body's deepest metabolic processes into a highly managed external responsibility. This daily submission confirms a chilling truth, that many chronic conditions force the body into a permanent, chemically dependent state, forever reliant on the outside world for internal function. The small, cold needle and the liquid in the syringe are the visible marks of this chemical sovereignty, a constant reminder of the body's ultimate internal failure. The mechanical voice. The terrifying reality of the laryngectomy, the surgical removal of the voice box, is a permanent absolute silencing of the natural self. The patient is robbed of the ability to speak, their voice replaced by a mechanical, buzzing prosthetic or a difficult learned esophageal speech. The core of audible identity is destroyed and replaced by an artificial sound. The hole created in the neck, the stoma, is a visible, shocking mark of the body's ultimate sacrifice. This permanent opening to the external world is a constant source of anxiety, confirming a deep hidden horror, that to survive, the body must sacrifice its most precious communicative function, becoming a mute, exposed vessel. The mechanical sound of the artificial voice, a strange buzzing monotone, is the chilling result of this sacrifice. The patient must speak through a machine, their emotions filtered and flattened by technology. This dependence on the external device confirms a truth, that life saved through such profound sacrifice often results in a terrifying diminished version of the self. The blood's vigil. The use of blood transfusions, accepting the physical life force of a stranger directly into one's own body, is a continuous, desperate form of biological borrowing. The body is sustained by an external anonymous supply of a vital fluid, confirming an ultimate dependence on the generosity and sacrifice of the unknown donor. The transfusion is a slow, quiet, profound act, a subtle merging of two lives. The patient is suspended between life and death, relying on the rhythmic drip of the crimson fluid to maintain their vitality. The warm, life-giving fluid from the cold plastic bag is a powerful contrast between silence and revelation, where the silent drip hides the immense biological power being transferred. The psychological weight of the anonymous blood is immense. The patient lives with the subtle fear that the donor's history, their unknown essence, is now flowing through their own veins. This regular, necessary borrowing confirms a terrifying truth, that the life of the self is not a complete contained entity, but a fragile system constantly needing to be topped up by the essence of others. The skin's silence. The use of topical anesthesia, creams and patches applied to the skin to completely numb a large area, is a temporary chemical form of sensory amputation. The mind is aware, but the body's largest organ is chemically silenced, unable to communicate pain, temperature, or touch. This controlled sensory loss is a terrifying preview of complete physical disconnection. The skin, the final protective barrier of the self, is chemically forced into submission, turning the largest, most expressive organ into a silent, unresponsive field. The patient can see the area being cut or violated, but the lack of pain creates an eerie, profound psychological disconnect. This chemical violation is a chilling example of chemical submission. When the drug wears off, the sudden, chaotic return of sensation is a profound shock, confirming the body's desperate struggle to restore its connection to the mind. This temporary complete erasure of communication confirms a disturbing truth, that the body's integrity is merely a chemical setting that can be easily and routinely turned off. The body's hollowing. The total removal of a major organ, a kidney, a lung, or the entire stomach, is a profound act of evisceration. While life-saving, this surgery leaves a literal permanent void in the body's architecture. The body learns to live with a huge internal emptiness where a vital part of the self once silently resided. The self is saved by being irrevocably diminished. The internal scar tissue and the empty space are a permanent, subtle physical reminder of the massive loss. The remaining organs must shift and compensate, creating an internal geometry that is forever warped by the sacrifice. The body becomes a slightly hollowed-out vessel, a haunted location where a piece of the life force was surgically expelled. This profound internal sacrifice confirms a dark truth, that the price of extending life is often the permanent dismemberment of the self. The patient is saved, but the body is permanently reduced, forced to continue its functions with a profound structural absence at its core. This deep, internal void acts as a constant physical rhetorical question about the integrity of the self. The permanent tether. The surgical insertion of a feeding tube directly into the stomach, gastrostomy, is a profound act of surrendering the most primal human function to technology. The mouth and throat are bypassed entirely, and the body's need for sustenance is fulfilled by a machine pumping fluid through a permanent portal in the abdomen. The self is permanently tethered to an external life source. The small, round, plastic device that remains in the abdomen is a constant visible sign of the body's failure to perform its basic function. It transforms the patient into a passive receptacle, requiring a machine and a formula to maintain life. This device is a powerful, unnerving symbolic imagery of utter permanent technological dependence. The daily ritual of hooking up the pump and receiving the artificial sustenance is a constant, humbling reminder of the body's ultimate surrender. This procedure confirms a frightening truth, that when the natural processes fail, the body is easily and permanently reduced to a mechanical input-output system, its very existence dictated by the schedule of the machine. The chemical erasure, progression. The terrifying total effect of propofol and similar powerful general anesthetics is the absolute chemical erasure of consciousness. The brain activity is suppressed to the point of clinical silence, leaving the body utterly limp and unresponsive. This is the ultimate temporary theft of the self, a controlled act of chemical obliteration that prepares for the deeper violations to come. The drug provides an instantaneous, complete blackout, taking the mind to the very threshold of death and back without conscious memory. The terror lies in the profound trust required, the willing surrender of the entire conscious self to a chemical that is only a hair's breadth away from being lethal. This chemical silence is the ultimate hidden horror of modern surgery. This final fact confirms the deep, dark power of modern pharmacology, the ability to dissolve consciousness completely, leaving the body compliant and silent for any surgical intrusion. This act of profound chemical erasure acts as a chilling transition into the final stages of the arc, where the body's ultimate survival relies on permanent external control. The blood's final surrender. The process of autologous blood donation, where a patient donates their own blood before surgery to receive it back later, is a chilling act of self-cannibalism. The body is forced to willingly surrender its life force to a cold storage bag, creating a deep visceral sense of internal debt. Life is saved by a pre-mortem extraction and a post-mortem return, turning the body into a self-sustaining system of debt and repayment. The terror lies in the knowledge that a piece of the living self is being kept in a sterile clinical freezer, a vital essence suspended in time. This cold, stored blood acts as a powerful cursed artifact, a literal piece of the self separated from the body, waiting to be readmitted only at the point of greatest weakness. The body willingly prepares for its own potential failure, accepting the necessary dismemberment of its life force. This procedure confirms a profound psychological horror. The patient must consciously prepare for the possibility of bleeding out and accept that their salvation relies on this prior act of self-theft. The body is reduced to a resource to be harvested, stored and recycled, a grim reflection of the ultimate technological reduction of the self. The gaze's replacement. The chilling reality of ocular prosthetics, replacing a lost eye with a perfectly crafted glass or plastic orb, is a profound violation of the self. The prosthetic is a piece of exquisite, cold artistry, designed to perfectly mimic life, yet it is utterly without vision or feeling. The gaze, the most intimate form of human connection, is replaced by a magnificent, unfeeling lie. The terror is in the paradox. The person looks whole, but the fake eye holds a dead, permanent stare that can never track, focus, or feel the light. It is a stunning, but chilling, haunted artifact, a beautiful deception that conceals a profound internal emptiness. The patient must live with the knowledge that a key part of their expressive soul has been replaced by cold, hard material. The daily ritual of removing and cleaning the prosthetic is a private confrontation with the absence, a stark reminder that the body's integrity is permanently compromised. This prosthetic gaze confirms a haunting truth, that salvation often requires substituting the true self with a brilliant, unfeeling forgery, maintaining the illusion of wholeness while hiding a profound loss. The chemical control. The widespread clinical use of birth control hormones is a massive long-term act of chemical control over the body's deepest, most primal biological command, reproduction. These drugs do not just prevent conception, they chemically subdue the entire reproductive system, overriding the body's natural cycle with a synthetic monthly decree. This is a profound, subtle act of chemical submission. The terror lies in the silence. The body's most ancient, life-affirming rhythm is chemically silenced, accepting the monthly synthetic command of the pill. This regular, calculated override of the deepest biological imperative transforms the reproductive system into a managed, controlled landscape. This constant chemical manipulation of the core cycle creates a terrifying, systemic open loop of uncertainty. This chemical control confirms a subtle yet profound truth about human biology, that the most powerful life-creating functions can be easily and routinely subdued by a manufactured chemical. The daily pill is a small, cold symbol of this total surrender, where the will to manage one's life overrides the body's natural sovereignty. The external scaffolding. The use of a surgical truss or permanent brace to support a ruptured disc or chronic weakness is a continuous mechanical correction of the body's failure. The patient is forced to wear an external cage of plastic and metal, a constant physical reminder that their own bone and muscle cannot be trusted to hold the self upright. The body is permanently corrected by technology. The deep psychological horror lies in the constant presence of the rigid apparatus, which restricts movement and transforms the natural flexibility of the body into a stiff, painful compliance. The brace becomes a symbolic imagery of the body's imprisonment, forcing an outward display of structural failure that can never be truly healed from within. The patient must live in this state of perpetual mechanized support, confirming a dark truth, that for some failures, the body's only option is to accept a lifelong painful reliance on external technology. The brace is a constant, cold, physical reminder of the spine's ultimate structural betrayal and the mind's acceptance of this permanent, mechanical dependency. The mind's permanent scar, the devastating consequences of stroke, the sudden, irreversible death of brain tissue due to a blocked artery, confirm the profound fragility of the conscious mind. The horror is in the sudden, silent annihilation of parts of the self. Memory, speech, or motor function can be instantly and permanently erased, leaving a profound psychological scar on the core of identity. The survivors left in a perpetual state of absence, living with a gap in their consciousness where a fundamental ability once resided. The self is fractured, forced to accept a new, diminished reality where communication and movement are stolen. The brain lesion itself is a physical haunted location, a dead patch of tissue that remains as a permanent memorial to the sudden biological betrayal. This sudden, catastrophic loss confirms a haunting truth, that the self is simply a fragile vascular system away from complete annihilation. This terrifying randomness of fate, the mere clogging of a small artery, acts as a terrifying foreshadowing of the final chaotic surrender of the brain to its own biological limits. The hidden core. The internal use of permanent cardiac pacemakers, a cold metallic machine implanted in the chest, constantly dictating the rhythm of the heart, is a profound technological surrender. The body is forced to accept that its most vital life-sustaining rhythm is no longer autonomous, but dictated by an unfeeling battery-powered device. The small hard lump beneath the skin is a constant physical reminder that the natural heart has failed, replaced by the mechanical arbitrary beat of the machine. The thin wires running from the device into the core of the heart are a permanent internal tether, transforming the organ into a technological captive. This device is a profound cursed artifact that sustains life by stealing its organic sovereignty. The entire existence of the patient is now dependent on a battery, a small disposable power source that holds the key to the heart's next beat. This total reliance confirms a chilling truth, that for ultimate survival, the sacred core of life must be permanently governed by a mechanism, accepting a cold metallic replacement for organic will. The skin's replacement. The extreme procedure of a skin graft, where large sheets of skin are removed from one part of the body to cover a massive wound on another, is a horrifying act of self-cannibalism. The body is cannibalized, consuming its own living tissue to repair a fatal rupture. Life is saved by a permanent, painful transaction, leaving the donor site scarred and diminished forever. The skin, the final largest barrier of the self, is treated as a mere resource, a commodity to be harvested and forcibly reapplied. The resulting texture of the graft, often unnaturally thin, pale and shiny, is a permanent repetition of the body's violent reconstruction. The donor site remains a constant, silent memorial to the necessary violation. This act confirms a deep, unsettling truth, that the body, when facing collapse, must resort to the brutal economy of self-mutilation. The patient lives with a patchwork of the self, a visible sign that the body's ultimate survival was purchased at the price of its own integrity and natural form. The permanent silence. The use of a tracheotomy, the surgical creation of a permanent opening in the neck for breathing, is a final, profound act of surrender. The natural airway is bypassed entirely, and the body's breath is now managed by a cold plastic tube inserted into the throat. The life force enters and exits through a surgically created hole, marking the body as permanently structurally compromised. The stoma, the small constant hole in the neck, is a visible, shocking sign of the body's internal failure. The patient must constantly monitor this opening, accepting the permanent exposed vulnerability of their airway. This permanent opening to the external world is a constant source of fear, confirming a deep hidden horror of chronic exposure. The patient's voice is forever altered, often reduced to a low, breathy whisper or completely silent. The sound of air passing through the plastic tube is the chilling soundtrack of their new mechanized breath. This permanent alteration of the respiratory system confirms that the price of life sometimes requires the absolute, structural sacrifice of the body's natural function. The chemical dependency. The treatment of chronic pain with long-term, powerful opioids creates a subtle, widespread chemical violation of the self. The mind is forced to accept a state of chemical numbness, trading, physical agony for a perpetual controlled surrender to a synthetic compound. The body is chemically forced into a dependent peace. The horror is in the inevitable addiction. The body and mind quickly learn to rely on the powerful compound, leaving the patient trapped in a state of chemical obedience. The pill bottle becomes a haunted artifact, holding the key to both relief and enslavement, confirming a profound paradox in the pursuit of comfort. This chemical control over one of the most fundamental human experiences, pain, confirms a chilling truth: that when suffering becomes chronic, the easiest solution is often the chemical erasure of sensation, regardless of the cost to autonomy. The patient is reduced to a compliant, chemically maintained state, accepting the dependency as the only path to functionality. The final gaze. The medical use of the eye dilator, a powerful chemical drop that forces the iris to open fully, paralyzing the eye's natural response to light, is a momentary, controlled violation of the sense of sight. The eye is rendered vulnerable, unable to defend itself from the light, exposing the deepest structure of the vision to the cold, clinical gaze of the physician. The terror is the temporary loss of control. The patient is blinded by the ordinary light, their vision blurred, forced into a state of profound sensory surrender. The mind must endure the painful overexposure, relying on the chemical command to finally release the iris. This moment of forced, painful vulnerability confirms a haunting truth about the fragility of the senses. The sheer power of the small drop of liquid, the ability to paralyze one of the most vital functions of the body, is a profound demonstration of chemical sovereignty. The eye, the window to the soul, is chemically forced open and rendered defenseless, confirming the easy, routine violation of the self required by diagnostic necessity. The body's new architecture, progression, the necessity of permanent breast or testicular implants, placing synthetic, unfeeling material into the body to replace lost tissue, is a final, technological submission to form over function. The body is reconstructed with cold, manufactured material, accepting a permanent internal lie to maintain the illusion of wholeness. The self is saved by being irrevocably mixed with the synthetic. The terror lies in the permanence of the foreign object, a hard, unfeeling material existing silently within the warm, organic core. The body is forced to accept this manufactured, inert material, constantly reminding the self that the natural living tissue has been replaced. This deep internal deception is a permanent mark of the body's fracture. This final substitution confirms a profound truth about the price of survival, that the body, in its ultimate betrayal, must be rebuilt with the cold, enduring material of the machine. This final fact acts as a powerful transition into the terrifying synthesis of the final facts, where the line between human and machine is completely dissolved. The joint's cold geometry. The necessity of total joint replacement, removing the painful, worn-out bone and cartilage, and cementing cold, unfeeling titanium and ceramic into the socket, is a final, chilling technological substitution. The body is forcibly dismembered and rebuilt with the hard, enduring material of the machine. The core ability to walk, stand, and move is permanently transferred to a metallic geometry. The terror lies in the profound difference between the organic and the synthetic. The new joint is perfect, unfeeling and cold, functioning flawlessly, but without the warmth or resilience of living tissue. The patient moves through the world with a permanent internal metallic secret, a cold, hard truth, replacing the subtle, flawed perfection of the original bone. The new joint is a powerful cursed artifact that grants mobility at the price of organic integrity. This substitution confirms a fundamental fear that the body's longevity ultimately requires it to become part machine. The permanent presence of the titanium and polyethylene, holding the structure upright, confirms that survival relies on accepting the cold, unfeeling permanence of the mechanical world within the organic self. The externalized life. The necessity of a colostomy or urostomy bag, rerouting the body's deepest eliminative functions to a permanent external opening, is a profound daily humiliation and surrender of autonomy. The body is permanently fractured, its integrity compromised, forcing the core function of the waste disposal to occur outside the confines of the skin, managed by a sterile plastic bag. The stoma, the small, constant opening in the abdomen, is a raw, visible mark of the body's ultimate failure. The patient must constantly monitor and manage this externalized life function, accepting the permanent, intimate presence of the technology on their skin. The small, sealed bag that collects the body's contents is a powerful yet unsettling, symbolic imagery of the body's life being literally contained in a plastic vessel. This profound externalization confirms a deep, final truth about survival, that the body, in its ultimate betrayal, must open itself to the outside world, creating a permanent, vulnerable portal. The patient lives in a state of chronic, intimate exposure, a chilling reminder that life, once contained and private, can become entirely externalized and managed. The chemical sovereignty. The chronic use of synthetic hormones, replacing thyroid, estrogen or testosterone, is a daily, chemical submission to a synthetic sovereign. The body's inability to produce its own vital, life-governing chemistry forces a total lifelong dependence on a manufactured chemical command. Life is saved by surrendering the deepest functions of identity and energy to a pill. The patient is trapped in a permanent cycle of monitoring and adjustment, trusting the laboratory, compound to perform the sacred function of organic balance. The entire inner ecosystem, mood, energy, and physical transformation, is dictated by the rhythmic ingestion of a synthetic chemical. This constant chemical override of the body's deepest commands is a true chemical submission. This daily reliance confirms a terrifying truth, that the very essence of personality and physical self is ultimately a fragile set of chemical balances that can be easily controlled and maintained by external industrial means. The small pill becomes a powerful, unnerving, haunted artifact, holding the secret to the patient's identity and energy. The mechanical mouth, the permanent installation of dental implants, screwing metal posts directly into the jawbone to hold artificial teeth, is a chilling violation of the skull. The most expressive and primal part of the body, the mouth, is forcibly rebuilt with permanent industrial titanium. The act of chewing, speaking, and smiling is forever reliant on the cold, hard permanence of the machine. The terror lies in the deep, violent intrusion into the bone. The metal post is sunk into the living structure of the skull, a permanent internal fixture that replaces the organic root. The resulting mechanical tooth, while functional and beautiful, rests on a foundation of cold, manufactured metal, confirming the permanent integration of technology into the core of the head. This mechanical mouth confirms a dark truth, that the body's most crucial daily functions are often saved only by accepting a permanent structural substitution. The patient lives with a fixed metallic certainty in their skull, a constant reminder of the body's failure and the necessary final surrender to technology. The invasive plumbing. The necessity of permanent urinary or chest catheters and drains is a chilling act of internal plumbing. The body is permanently fitted with plastic tubing, forcing the life-sustaining fluids to pass through an external mechanism. The body is reduced to a passive, open system, its deepest internal processes managed by a simple, cold plastic tube. The terror is in the constant, quiet violation. The plastic tube is a permanent foreign object, a passive spy residing in the most protected cavities of the body. The patient is forced to accept this chilling intimacy, the body's internal flow perpetually managed by an unfeeling external piece of industrial material. This invasive plumbing confirms a deep open loop of vulnerability. This forced exposure confirms a terrifying truth, that for some failures, the body must accept a state of permanent, external management. The patient becomes a system of tubing and collection bags, a profound, visible sacrifice of organic integrity to the demands of technological survival. The voice's ghost. The ultimate form of communicative sacrifice is the total reliance on a mechanical larynx or electrolarynx to produce speech. The natural voice is completely destroyed and replaced by a buzzing, electronic vibration that sounds monotone and inhuman. The self's identity, carried on the air of the breath, is reduced to a cold, buzzing frequency held up to the neck. The terror is the chilling reduction of language. The ability to express emotion, tone, and character is filtered and flattened by the machine. The patient holds the cold, buzzing device to their throat, allowing the machine to substitute its vibration for the self's lost sound. The mechanical buzz is a profound, constant soundtrack of the body's ultimate failure. This complete technological substitution confirms a dark truth, that the ultimate price of survival is the absolute destruction of the audible self. The voice becomes a ghost, its memory residing only in the unnatural rhythmic buzz of the machine that must be held to the throat. The machine speaks, but the person is permanently silenced. The technological temperature. The chemical and mechanical control of body temperature during surgery or critical care, forcing the body into hypothermia or hypothermia, is a final, total surrender of organic regulation. The body is forced to operate outside its own natural parameters, its core, life-sustaining function dictated by the cold, precise command of the machine. The terror lies in the chilling awareness that the body's natural defenses are completely suspended, replaced by the mechanical thermostat of the ICU. The patient's core temperature is reduced to an arbitrary number on a digital screen, confirming the ultimate, final reduction of life to a measurable technological variable. This enforced control is a constant repetition of the body's ultimate fragility. This profound technological management confirms a dark truth, that for ultimate survival, the sacred self-regulating systems of the body must be sacrificed and managed by external means. The patient becomes a passive object, heated and cooled not by nature, but by the cold, precise calculations of the machine. The final confirmation, the clinical confirmation of brain death, where the physical body is still warm, the heart is still beating, and the breath is sustained by a machine, but all consciousness is gone, is the ultimate terrifying synthesis of modern horror. The body is rendered a living, breathing corpse, a warm, functioning shell housing a final, profound absence. The terror is absolute. The patient is reduced to a biological object, a perpetual haunted location where the spirit has fled but the machine forces the flesh to continue its rhythmic functions. The constant mechanical sigh of the ventilator is the chilling, final sound of a body being used rather than living, a terrifying confirmation of the technological dominance over the definition of life. This profound technological separation of life from consciousness confirms a dark truth, that the body can be coerced into existing long after the self has ceased to be. The rhythmic mechanical heartbeat is the final, agonizing sound of the machine's victory over the biological end, confirming the utter, chilling finality of the biological failure. The frozen relic. The speculative horror of cryonics, the freezing of a brain or entire body in the hope of future revival, is the ultimate technological sacrifice of the self. The final desperate act is to willingly reduce the body to a silent, inert relic, a frozen commodity waiting for a technological savior that may never arrive. The terror lies in the absolute stillness of the frozen body, suspended in a state of eternal chilling rest. The brain, the source of all consciousness, is reduced to a crystalline object, a profound, cold symbol of the ultimate submission to technological whim. This frozen existence is a terrifying mystery about the nature of life and the possibility of a non-spiritual return. This profound, final surrender confirms a haunting truth, that the fear of death is so absolute that humanity will reduce its most sacred possession, the body, to a cold, technological resource. The frozen tank becomes a sacred tomb, holding a final, silent, and deeply uncertain promise of a mechanical rebirth. The final prison. The total, systemic reliance on the hospital or chronic care facility as the final environment of life is the ultimate spatial surrender. The outside world is abandoned, and life is reduced to the confines of a single room where all bodily needs are met by technology and staff. The patient is held captive by the very systems designed to sustain life. The terror is in the constant rhythmic sound of the monitors, the beeps and clicks becoming the final, confining soundtrack of existence. The body is a tethered prisoner, its mobility and freedom replaced by the cold, necessary proximity of the machines. The world is reduced to the four white walls of the final cell, a terrifying synthesis of all technological dependency. This final, spatial confinement confirms a terrifying truth, that life, when reduced to its ultimate fragility, is often maintained only by a complex system of walls and machines. The hospital room is the final perfect prison, a clean white cage where the cost of survival is absolute total freedom. The body's inventory. The realization that the body is now a repository of dozens of foreign inert materials, sutures, screws, plates, implants, pins, and permanent tubes, is the final, chilling inventory of the self. The human form has been completely permeated by the industrial world, becoming a complex museum of technological intervention. The terror is in the sheer quantity of the synthetic, unfeeling objects now residing within the organic core. The patient is no longer a purely biological entity, but a fragile, haunted artifact, a complex fusion of flesh and manufactured material. The total weight of all these internal intrusions confirms the final, irreversible colonization of the self by technology. This ultimate synthesis of all the metallic, plastic and chemical intrusions confirms the central, terrifying truth of the entire series, that the price of life is the total, irreversible sacrifice of organic integrity. The body has been saved, but it has been transformed into a cold, technological relic of its former, pure, organic self. The final synthesis, climax. The final, terrifying truth of the 100 creepy facts is that the modern body is no longer a sovereign organic temple, but a chemically subdued, surgically violated and technologically sustained relic. Every single medical and survival fact confirms that life extension requires the utter, irreversible surrender of autonomy, purity and integrity. The human being has become a meticulously managed, mechanically augmented and chemically compliant object. The climax of the modern condition is the constant rhythmic repetition of this violation. The daily pill, the weekly dialysis, the constant monitoring, the permanent implant. The original, authentic self is dead, replaced by a meticulously maintained technological forgery. The final horror is the realization that the body is now a beautiful, cold machine, saved by being permanently broken and remade. The terror of the unknown has been replaced by the chilling certainty of the final price. We are tethered by wires, sustained by borrowed fluids, controlled by chemicals, and held together by metal. The ultimate sacrifice has been made, the self has been traded for the machine, and the machine will never let go. The price is paid in full. The journey through the 100 creepy facts is now complete, but the questions remain open. If you've felt the unsettling cold of the operating room, if the whispers of chemical obedience still echo in your mind, then the horror has found its mark. The machine has claimed its price. Do not let this knowledge vanish into the void. Share this final synthesis with those you trust and those you fear. Tell us, which single violation was the most profound, the most unforgivable trespass upon the integrity of the self? Was it the blade, the chemical, or the permanent tether? Engage the discussion below, subscribe to the channel to keep the dark secrets flowing, and ensure the truth is always kept in the sterile light. The truth is terrifying, but silence is consent. We began seeking secrets in the shadows of history and ended by finding them inside our own bodies. The ultimate horror is not the past, it is the present. The realization that we are all now permanent relics, maintained by the cold precision of the machine. The technological sublime has delivered us from death, but demanded the soul as payment. The line between the human and the artifact is permanently dissolved, and the final question lingers in the sterile air. If the body is a machine, kept alive by chemical obedience and metallic tethering, then what part of the original self remains? Still breathing, still conscious? The sacrifice is complete. Look within. The horror is already there.